well, a report rather, that an EFF employee who's also the brother of the party's Deputy President Floyd Shivambu is alleged to have pocketed 16 million rand from the Great Bank Heist at VBS Mutual Bank. In March this year, the regulator of all the banks of South Africa, the South African Reserve Bank, appointed investigators to probe liquidity challenges at VBS Mutual Bank. Advocate Terry Motau was appointed the curator of the bank. He took over the running of the bank in the same month. His forensic report was released yesterday. Joining us live on Skype now, we get reaction from Mr Khulekani Mathe. He's the Senior General Manager for Financial Inclusion Division from the Banking Association of South Africa. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. To what degree has this scandal hurt the credibility of the banking sector, particularly the Reserve Bank?
Good morning to you and the viewers of SABC. More than anything, I think when people who hold high positions in institutions decide to act in this manner, they hurt poor people. They hurt those people who have trusted them with their money, not large amounts of money, because these are not rich people. So the biggest hurt is to those people, which is why we support the recommendations of the investigator to really get to the bottom of this, referring this to the prosecution authority so that it can be prosecuted, and every effort made to recover the money. As far as the Reserve Bank is concerned, I think what we've seen, certainly from our perspective, is a Reserve Bank and regulator that when it became aware of the fact that something was not right, it acted swiftly, put the bank under curatorship and instituted an investigation. And when that investigation was completed, the report was made public, which is why we are discussing it today. So
Mr. Mathe,
where we sit,
Mr. Mathe, that's 2 billion rands later.
Yes.
There must be something to be said about an overhaul of the system.
So the system is based on the fact that we have various institutions in society that perform different roles. So we have professions like the auditing profession, you have the legal profession, you have us as bankers and many other professions. So the SAB was lied to by those auditors who signed off statements as if those statements were correct. When they became aware that there's something wrong, they acted. So here we have a situation where a scheme, very elaborate scheme, was put together to really mislead the regulator. And so I don't think we should just see this as the regulator not having acted, when in fact institutions that are supposed to do the checks and balances have failed society.
What's society's recourse in this instance then?
Again, I'll say that we are lucky to live in a society where at least when wrongdoing surfaces, investigations of this kind are carried out. And as we now know what the recommendations are, and one of those recommendations is, in fact, that those who have acted criminally must be charged, but they must also face civil claims so that the monies are recovered, and those who have lost out in this scheme can at least get some of the money back. That's one part of what society can at least get out of this. But this whole saga and the investigation in particular is revealing to us perhaps the fact that there may be weaknesses in the various parts that hold the system together. And so lessons will have to be learned here about how to tighten the frameworks from a regulatory point of view, from the professions that are involved, yes, so that we not have this recurring in future.
Tell us about the Banking Association of South Africa. How do you operate, and what influence do you have over members who are not necessarily your members? And was VBS a member of the Banking Association of South Africa?
Indeed. VBS was a member of the Banking Association. So the association is an industry body which obviously members join voluntarily, so we are a voluntary association. But in order to be a member of the Banking Association, you have to have a banking license granted to you by the relevant authorities. when the authorities remove your license or withdraw your license, we can no longer keep you as our member.
So in this instance, a banking license gave people the right to loot?
No, that is incorrect. The banking license gave people the right to conduct a banking business. Individuals then decided to go rogue and do wrong things. I mean, if we said that the license gives people the right to loot, you would be implying that all other banks are given the right to loot, which is incorrect.
But what happened to oversight? You say that only a banking license gives an institution the right to be a member of your organization. Do you question the way they run business and their operations?
As I've indicated, we are a voluntary association, so we do not get involved in the actual running of the business of any of our members. We rely on the fact that these are institutions that are regulated, they are monitored, they submit reports regularly to the authorities, and for as long as the authorities are happy that they are indeed playing by the rules, we will keep them as our members.
So what is the work of the Banking Association, the work of the Banking Association of South Africa, that we at this moment can hold them accountable for?
We are an industry association, so we represent banks in their doing business in South Africa. Now, we only represent them insofar as they do right and they abide by the rules. When they go wrong, as we have indicated in our statements, that we support the recommendations of the investigators, they must face the music.
Let me ask you, Mr. Mathe, on the sideline, what sort of conversations were being held both within the Banking Association and with your broader membership about what has transpired at VBS and what lessons can be learned here?
So clearly, when the regulators put VBS under curatorship, we were concerned because if anything happens to one of our institutions, obviously it has the potential to do a damage to the reputation of the industry. So we were concerned about that. We wanted to give the regulators the time to work through this whole thing, so that we can then take decisions in terms of the continued membership of VBS. We now know what's happened. We now know the recommendations of the investigators, and clearly they cannot continue to do the business of banking as was recommended by the investigators.
It's difficult for the man on the street to get a bank account. It's one of the biggest challenges in South Africa. When such a situation as the VBS conversation takes place, does it give your association the opportunity to go back and look at what conversations you should be having within your industry?
I would say that on the contrary, we have over time, and in the Banking Association, I'm responsible for financial inclusion. We're really responsible for all the attempts that are made by the industry to try and include as many people as possible, which is why it really pains us the fact that the poor people who have trusted a banking organization with their money get hurt in the way that this has happened. But as an industry, we continue to try and put in place measures, bring to market products that are including as many people as possible so that we do not have people who are denied participation in the financial services sector.
How are you going to try to be part of the process to try and recoup the money of all those people who are languishing and waiting to hear if there is any chance that they can get back their money?
There's clearly a legal process here, and the recommendations are clear from the investigators of what needs to be done. Firstly, to hold accountable criminally those who have defrauded depositors, as well as to try and recoup the money. And as much as can be recouped, those who have been defrauded will obviously be given their monies back by the relevant authorities, in this case, the curator of the bank and the South African Reserve Bank.
Do you have a system of monitoring your members in terms of how they work within the law, and are you able to pick up if there are any red herrings that needs to be looked at?
We work very closely with the South African Reserve Bank because as an industry body that represents the banks, we are obviously in touch with the Reserve Bank on a regular basis on a whole range of issues, ranging from policy, regulations, and so on. So when the Reserve Bank flags issues of this type, we obviously take those matters seriously.
Mr. Mathe, how do we recover from this?
This clearly, I think we must sit back and say, okay, how did all of this happen? What can we learn from this saga? Right. Where do we need legislation, as well as in how the various professions are running and doing their oversight over their members, because these professionals are licensed to practice as auditors and so on. So everybody concerned here will have to look at, is there a role that they can play in closing the loopholes that may have allowed this to happen, so that we can rebuild trust in the auditing profession, rebuild trust in the banking industry, and rebuild trust in the governance framework of our country altogether.
Or perhaps just look at completely new ways of making sure, verifying that processes are followed. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Khulekani Mathe is a General Manager in the Financial Inclusion Division from the Banking Association of South Africa, giving us some perspective in terms of the banking industry side and their reaction to the VBS report.